Welcome back to the channel. Today's video I'm going to show you how to take portrait shots, all the different features that your camera phone gives you for different lighting effects, and also it gives you different apertures. That means you can get different depths of focus. I'll explain what all that means, so stay tuned and keep watching. Let's get started. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to take all the shots as selfies, but it works exactly the same if you're taking a portrait of a subject. So if you've got a friend or a model that you can use, then do go ahead and use that, and use this camera, the one that's on the back of your phone. It'll give you a much better quality image. But just so I can record it and shows you what's going on, I'm going to use a selfie camera. Now that's not quite as good a quality as the ones you've got on the back of your phone, but it'll show you all the different effects just as well. So you can try it out on the selfie mode too. So the first thing we're going to do is open up the camera app and select portrait. Now when we've done that, on the iPhone you get a cube with a little circle or globe in the middle of it, and it shows you different lighting effects. Now what do all those mean? The first one you come across is natural light. That's why we're stood out here today. We're in natural light. But if you're stood by a window, for example, it would be the same idea. Or if you've got a window facing your subject, which is the best way to light them, so the light falling from the window directly onto them. Now the next one you get is studio light. Now what the phone tries to do there, and this is just done in software, is make the face a little bit brighter, as if studio lights were shining onto the subject's face. The next option you get is contour light. Now this is quite similar to the studio light, but what it's trying to do is give you much more harsh lighting. So you'll see bigger, you'll see a bigger contrast between the highlights and the lowlights. So it's a more dramatic effect. After that, you get stage light. Now with stage light, you get a black background. So it's just as if the subject was lit, everything else behind it was dark. The next option is stage light mono. So that's exactly the same. It's just a black and white image. So your subject goes black and white. Obviously the background is already black, so that stays black. And the final option you've got is high key light mono. Now in high key light mono, it does the opposite really to what you got with the stage light mono, but it flips it around so the background is now white and you've got a strong light shining onto your subject. So I'll just take a few in each of those so you can see what's going on. Now, there are a number of adjustments you can make. So natural light, if I touch on the top of the screen, I can get a number of symbols down the bottom. Let's start actually with flash. So we can have the flash either on or off or on auto, and that's really your choice. Just remember that if you have it on, it'll add a slightly harsher lighting because flash tends to be quite harsh. Okay, let's move to the next one, which is the exposure. And you now get a graduated scale at the bottom of the screen just above the shutter button, and you can adjust the exposure either negatively or positively, and you'll see my face is going lighter or darker depending which way I do it. And usually you might want it somewhere a little bit plus, maybe just to take out some shadows on the face. So that's how you adjust the exposure. The next thing you get is the timer. So this allows you to set a delay before the shutter goes off, and this is really what you would use for taking pictures where you want to include yourself. So if you had a subject to photograph, a model or a friend or whatever, then you could walk into the shot and join them, and you can give yourself either 3 or 10 seconds in this case. The next one after that is filters, and I'm sure you're probably all familiar with those, or certainly seeing filtered photos, but you can see the effects on the screen as you choose different filters. If you find one you like, by all means go for it and try that. And then the final one, which you might not be as familiar with, which is F, weirdly enough, for Aperture. Now the aperture is measured in a thing called f-stops, and the key point here is the smaller the number, the wider the aperture. And the wider the aperture, the more likely the background is to go out of focus. So if you're looking for those portrait shots where everything is out of focus behind your subject, then go for very wide apertures. That's very small numbers, like this at f1.4. Let me show you the other extreme. So this is at f16. Now you can see perfectly all the background is in focus. So there it is at f1.4. There it is at f16. If you want a good compromise, somewhere around 2.8 will give you a little bit of blur to the background, but still keep most of your subject in focus. Now there's one point you need to bear in mind. If you do like the f1.4, just be careful you're not putting your subject out of focus, because it might be that, you know, the back of their head or the back of their neck or something starting to go out of focus with those very wide apertures. So if you choose one of the lighting modes, I've chosen studio light for example, and you touch on this symbol at the top of the screen that looks a little bit like a light, you can adjust the intensity of that light. So at the middle it starts at 50, but you can take it right up to 100, and now you can see it's trying to make my face as light as possible. In fact, I think it's overdone it, it's a bit unpleasant. If you take it right down to the other extreme, you'll see a lot more shadows appear. So that's with no light at all. And you can play around with that till you've got a satisfactory effect, of one you're happy with, and then take your shot. So that's all the adjustments you can make. Well, the next thing to do, go out and practice and get some nice portraits. Particularly play with the f-stop and understand how much you need to set that, how wide you want it to get the kind of effects you're looking for. The other thing you could do is play with the exposure just to try and alleviate some of the shadows. You know, if you're photographing men, you might want more shadows, make them look a little bit harsher. If you're photographing a woman, you might want it to look softer. So you might want to adjust the exposure so it's overexposing a little bit, just to make the whole thing a little bit softer. Hope you've enjoyed that video, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of your great portrait shots in the Nifty 50 Photographers Facebook group. Now, if you want a better understanding of things like depth of field and depth of focus, I recommend you watch this video next. I look forward to seeing you next time.